There's always a story about the data that we capture. And so I wanted to tell you the story about the data set that I'm going to share with you today. So this starts on the Great Barrier Reef off the coast of Queensland. The reef is huge, so it's about the size of Italy or Victoria plus Tasmania put together, and it's made up of about 3,000 individual reefs. So it's a really big area. And when your question is trying to work out how much live coral there is, you can probably appreciate that that's quite a challenging thing to do. So I'm going to come all the way down to the southern Great Barrier Reef, and in particular to this little reef just here, which is Heron Reef. And this is what it looks like. It's about 11 kilometres across from east-west and 4 kilometres in the north-south direction. And you can imagine again that this is only one of 3,000 reefs. So you might think that, that maybe that's not that big to get out there and map and monitor and figure out how much live coral there is, but it is actually still quite a sizable area, and one of 3,000 is a really big challenge. The island itself up here is about 800 metres across and 400 metres north-south. There's a research station, a resort, and some forest here. Now, most of the live coral is around the edges of the reef, so some of this brown stuff that you see. And so that's on the reef crest and reef slope, and some parts on the reef flat as well. One of the challenges that we have is that this is the most detail that we can see in any satellite data set. So you can zoom all the way in, but it's really hard to see the live coral. And so that's actually the reason why I use drones in the first place. So you get so much more detail. You can fly at the altitude that you need. You can zoom all the way in and see the live coral. Of course, you can see it a little bit better when you're in water, but then that's a really big area to swim all around. Now, what you see in my right hand here is what we call a radiometer. Now, this is a piece of equipment that I first used on the reef in the late 90s, and it's got a couple of different sensors in it that measures the blue, green, red, and near-infrared light that's reflected off the reef. Now, I use this as an undergraduate student to try and look at how the different levels of reflectance varied based on the different types of coral that we could see. And I always thought back then that it would be really cool if we could put something like this onto something that would fly over the reef and take these measurements for us, because it was actually really uncomfortable and quite heavy to carry, and then you had to manually take down the values that you would read, and then you'd come back and graph that later. So fast forward about 20 years, and then what you see in my left hand is a drone, and it's actually got a much more sophisticated sensor on it that's capturing this sort of information. And this particular one it's got a spectrometer under here, which is measuring lots of different wavelengths of light, and then a GoPro camera there as well. And what we can also do is then fix a different type of camera, and the data set that I'm sharing today is actually from a Parrot Sequoia multispectral camera. And so the data that you can see out of that looks something like this. So this strip in the middle is a stitched together ortho mosaic, like what I shared on Monday, in terms of all the individual photos taken and put together. And it's sitting over the top of a satellite image. And you can see the satellite image in the background. You can't see the individual corals, but you can see this red shade. And that red shade is the near-infrared reflected light. And that indicates some live coral or potentially some algae there as well. Really difficult to get this information unless the tide is super low, because that sort of light is absorbed by the water column. So here's the data set that I have for you today. It's a small subset of the area, so it's a relatively small and easily manageable area that you can have a look at. Again, that red is showing us near-infrared reflected light, and this is shown a lot in agricultural or forestry studies to show healthy vegetation, for example. But here we're looking at it to see healthy coral, and you can even see some sea cucumbers on the sand here in these really shallow little pools. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with the data. Let me know what it goes like for you.